Imagine one of rock music's most magnetic figures striding onto a fog-filled stage, beckoning the crowd with smoldering eyes and a baritone that rattles your chest. But behind the spotlight and the leather jacket stood a woman whose heart hardened at the mere mention of her son's name. This is the astonishing story of Clara Morrison, Jim's own mother, who years later confessed she had nothing but disdain for her wildly talented but self-destructive child. What drove a mother to utter contempt for the very boy she raised? Today, we peel back decades of myth and legend, dive into family diaries and private letters, and finally understand the hidden reason Clara could never reconcile the Doors frontman with the son she hoped to nurture. Clara Virginia Morrison was a woman of her time, graceful, composed, the embodiment of mid-century propriety. She married George Stephen Morrison, a decorated naval officer, and moved from Florida's quiet suburbs to a life defined by his orders and her impeccable manners. When young Jim was born in December 1943, she embraced the role of devoted mother. Quiet piano lessons in the living room, strict curfews, and Sundays at the Baptist church. But beneath the prim veneer lay a fierce pride and an unshakable belief in discipline. Clara loved beauty in measured doses, symphonies, oil paintings, well-spoken sentences. She believed life's highest calling was service and order, not reckless self-indulgence. By high school, Jim Morrison's path diverged from his mother's blueprint. His poetry spilled onto notebook margins, filled with Dionysian imagery and questions about mortality. Classical compositions became acid rock sonatas. What began as teenage rebellion soon transformed into full-blown contempt for anything he deemed bourgeois. Clara recoiled at the drooping fedoras, the late-night gatherings, the undercurrent of substance use. She saw not a visionary, but a boy wilting under his own arrogance. She hated the way he twisted theology into nihilistic performance art, how he cursed God on stage and dared death itself to take him. Every time he flung himself at an audience in animalistic rapture, her maternal instincts recoiled in horror. For years, family letters remained locked away until biographer Tom Connolly gained access in his 2005 Mother of Doors manuscript. Clara's handwriting revealed a mother torn between guilt and revulsion. In one letter to her sister Hazel, she wrote, "Jim's voice rattles my soul like thunder, yet I cannot bear its excess. He mocks my faith and our quiet life. I grieve for the son I urged to greatness." Another note, sketched on Southern Methodist University stationery, lamented, "I wonder if he even knows the meaning of home. His spirit is so untamable it frightens me." These fragments unveiled how deeply she feared his choices and how impossible she found his mercurial fame. Behind closed doors, Clara confronted the final straw, Jim's spiraling infatuation with intoxication. By 1969, amid sold-out tours and adoring crowds, he retreated into a haze of whiskey and mescaline. Clara flew out from Los Angeles to Paris, desperate to retrieve her only child from the claws of self-destruction. Accounts from close friend Pamela Corson reveal Clara bursting into Jim's rented apartment, clutching a Bible in one hand and social worker referrals in the other. She begged him to see reason, to remember their Sunday prayers. He recoiled, calling her a ghost of repression and shoving her back onto the sofa. That final confrontation sealed her perception. Her son had morphed into a stranger, a talented stranger who betrayed every lesson she'd instilled. Yet Clara's disdain went deeper than religion or substance. As we sift through her personal journals, a more painful truth emerges. She resented the man Jim became because she saw reflections of her own unspoken fears. In her youth, Clara's father pressured her to marry a stable man, to keep society's respect rather than chase forbidden passions. She obeyed, burying her artistic yearnings. When Jim broke free, pursued poetry and music, she recognized the echo of what she never allowed herself. His rebellion became a mirror revealing her own regrets. Ironically, her hatred masked heartbreak. She hated Jim not only for what he did, but for who he forced her to remember she might have been. And now, with decades of hindsight, Clara's private agony becomes clear. She saw a whirlwind of creativity that embodied her repressed dreams, and it terrified her. In a final entry dated January 1970, mere months before Jim's tragic death, she wrote, I do not hate Jim for his gifts, but for the reminder they carry. He is living the life I feared, and in doing so, he condemns my choices. I ache for the boy who once played piano at our feet. That child is gone. For all his poetic brilliance, Jim's greatest tragedy was inheriting a mother whose love was entwined with fear and regret. After Jim's sudden death in Paris on July 3, 1971, Clara's grief was shrouded in a complex tangle of pride, sorrow, and lingering resentment. While the world mourned its rock icon, Clara remained conspicuously absent from memorials and ceremonies. Instead, she retreated to her Florida home, shutting out reporters and band members who pleaded for closure. In private journals, she described his passing not as a tragedy of artistic loss, but as the final collapse of her worst fears. She wrote of relief that his daily self-destruction had ended, yet confessed guilt for feeling that relief. To her, his legend promised immortality but delivered only a tragic coda to an unhealthy obsession. In the weeks following the news of his death, Clara confronted the legal fallout. With no will in hand, Jim's estate defaulted to his next of kin, his parents. Clara and her husband George faced the choice of protecting his musical legacy or embracing the role of executors buried in controversy. Clara insisted that any future compilations omit references to his drug-fueled exploits and focus solely on lyrics that reflected his early poetry and classical influences. She vetoed provocative cover art and delayed fund transfers until biographers agreed to censor passages she deemed morally corrosive. Those who negotiated with her recalled meetings where she delivered scathing admonitions about preserving his dignity and upholding her vision of propriety. Yet colleagues who had known Jim disagreed with her restrictive approach. Former bandmates felt that by sanitizing his work, Clara risked erasing the very ethos that fueled their creative chemistry. They argued she was crucifying the pulse of rock in favor of a sanitized shrine. Tension mounted in 1973 when producers attempted a documentary featuring candid footage of Paris rehearsals. Clara blocked the film, citing harassment of memory, and sued to halt distribution. The litigation lasted years, and only when settlement terms allowed limited archival access did the project finally release. Critics noted that the final version felt incomplete, as if missing the raw undercurrents that had made Jim's performances legendary. It was during these legal battles that Clara's public persona transformed from grieving mother to austere guardian. She granted few interviews and rarely appeared in photographs. Paparazzi photos from her gated estate showed her steering clear of plants flourishing under the southern sun. When asked by journalist Dan Reynolds why she refused to speak about her son's talent, she replied, "Talent without discipline is chaos. He chose chaos. Now let the world remember him wisely." Those words reignited debate about whether a parent's version of remembrance could ever do justice to a figure as countercultural as Jim Morrison. Biographers and psychologists later examined Clara's stance as a form of overreach, an attempt to rewrite history according to her own moral code. Dr. Elaine Thornton, who studied bereaved parents of celebrities, suggested Clara's actions were driven by unresolved guilt and fear of social condemnation. She noted that children of military officers often internalize a rigid sense of duty and reputation. For Clara, the combination of her soldier husband's discipline and her own strict upbringing meant that Jim's public scandals felt like personal betrayals. Her efforts to control narratives became a coping mechanism, an attempt to regain the order she believed he had destroyed. It was only in the late 1990s, as nostalgia for classic rock grew, that Clara softened her stance. With the rise of Doors tribute festivals and posthumous box sets, she began granting permissions she had once denied. In 1998, she authorized a live album released with liner notes acknowledging both his genius and his demons. In a brief televised segment, she admitted, "I see now that my son's life was both beautiful and broken in ways I failed to comprehend. I was his mother, not his critic." Though measured, these words marked a breakthrough in her relationship to his legacy, a tacit acceptance that her vision and his reality were forever intertwined. Underlying this gradual reconciliation was a profound revelation Clara had kept hidden until shortly before her own passing in 1995. In a sealed letter discovered by Jim's biographers in 2008, She confessed that her fear of Jim's self-destruction mirrored an unspeakable childhood trauma. At age 7, she lost her younger brother to a house fire that started while he and friends experimented with matches. She wrote that watching her brother perish engulfed her with helpless terror and guilt. She vowed never to lose another child to flames of excess and rebellion. Her aversion to Jim's self-destructive performances, laden with dangerous dares and substance use, was rooted in that early loss. Her hatred sprang not from cruelty, but from fierce fear of losing another child to dangerous, tragic excess. The revelation of Clara's buried childhood trauma transformed the narrative around Jim Morrison's life and legacy. Scholars who had once portrayed Clara as a rigid matriarch suddenly saw a mother driven by the specter of the brother she lost. Dr. Howard Beecham, a historian who specializes in celebrity families, noted that the letter reframes Clara's control of Jim's estate not as mere propriety, but as a desperate attempt to shield him from what she viewed as flames eating at his soul. In academic circles, this insight sparked a new wave of research into how family trauma can ripple across generations, manifesting in artistic rebellion or parental suppression. What had once appeared as simple disdain now revealed a twisted bond of fear and protectiveness. Clara's contempt emerged not from contempt itself, but from terror that the genius she bore might burn out in the same way her brother had. Meanwhile, Doors aficionados reacted with a blend of empathy and renewed curiosity. Fan communities that had long vilified Clara for whitewashing Jim's more scandalous moments paused to reassess. Online forums filled with posts like "A Mother's Wounds" and "Her Heart in Ashes," debating whether Clara's secrecy invalidated Jim's artistry or added a bittersweet depth to his mythos. Collectors sought out rare photographs from family archives, hoping to glimpse the son she first knew before the leather-clad rock god. Tribute bands dedicated entire sets to exploring the lyrics Clara had once earmarked as reflective of Jim's early poetic soul. For many, understanding Clara's fear deepened their appreciation for the Doors' fusion of ecstasy and despair. Lyrics that once felt like bravado now resonated as cries for help, pleas that Clara, working behind the velvet rope of propriety, tried to hush rather than heed. Critics also revisited Jim's film ventures and poetry collections through this new lens. His unpublished manuscript, Under Parisian Moons, which Clara initially blocked from publication, gained fresh academic interest. Literary scholars argued that passages depicting a mother's scream beneath the firelight mirrored Clara's repressed memories. They posited that Jim's fascination with Dionysian rituals and mortality was less a rejection of his upbringing than an attempt to purge inherited traumas. The Doors' darker compositions, Light My Fire, The End, When the Music's Over, were reinterpreted as cathartic rites, stages on which Jim exorcised not only his demons, but those passed down through his bloodline. This reframing elevated his work from countercultural anthem to a generational confession, making every performance a ritualistic confrontation with a mother's silent grief. Biographers racing to update their accounts scrambled to reorder chapters. Tom Connolly, whose earlier manuscript focused on Clara's role as an obstacle, released a revised edition in 2010 titled The Mother in the Mirror. He wrote that the sealed letter was the Rosetta Stone to understanding both Clara and Jim. His new introduction reflected on how the fear of repetition can twist parental love into a craving for control. Connolly's biographical pivot inspired documentaries that juxtaposed Clara's preserved letters with archival footage of Jim roaring into the microphone. Viewers saw the same family home, where she took piano lessons now echoing with her son's defiant roar. The juxtaposition cut deeper than any critique, revealing how the distance between a mother's fear and a son's courage can resonate across a stage and through time. As Clara softened her stance in the late 90s, granting permissions for curated releases, she also instigated a surprising collaboration with surviving Doors members. Ray Manzarek and Robbie Krieger, initially wary of her motives, agreed to co-curate a box set of live recordings, seeking to honor both Jim's brilliance and Clara's vision of artistic dignity. The resulting compilation, Doors, Fire and Grace, balanced raw concert tapes with acoustic demos that resonated more closely with Clara's earlier beige-draped parlor recitals. Music journalists praised the set as a bridge between a mother's longing for control and a band's unbridled creativity. For the first time, Clara's fingerprints were acknowledged not as censorship, but as part of a shared tapestry, threads that, when woven together, revealed the full design of Jim's life. In the final years before her death in 1995, Clara traveled to UCLA archives to donate personal artifacts, her late brother's charred pocket watch alongside Jim's leather jacket. In a recorded interview, she held the watch in one hand and the jacket in the other, eyes glistening, and said, "Two lives marked by flame, one extinguished too soon, the other burning for too long." She spoke candidly about her regrets, how her own silence sealed off the heart she wished to open. Clara confessed she had spent decades trying to lock away what frightened her most, only to discover that confronting those fears, through letters, music, and memory, was the truest form of love. Her final act of reconciliation was to enrich Jim's myth rather than diminish it, offering fans and family a fuller portrait of both mother and son. Today, galleries host exhibits showcasing Clara's handwritten letters alongside Doors memorabilia, allowing visitors to trace the arc from childbirth to heartbreak, from barred gates to reconciled legacies. Academic conferences dissect the interplay of family trauma and artistic expression, often citing Clara's experience as a case study in generational psychology. Even the annual Doors Fest, once a pure celebration of rock, now includes panels on parental shadows and creative fire, a direct nod to Clara's hidden pain. What began as a mother's contempt grew into a catalyst for deeper understanding of how our past shapes our public personas. Clara's confession that she hated Jim because I feared him now resonates as a universal truth. When we confront the fires within our families, we may yet discover the source of our greatest gifts. That will explore the lasting impact of Clara's story on contemporary discussions about celebrity bereavement, parental influence, and the resilience of artistic legacy. Plus, 3 modern examples where similar family dynamics have shaped the careers of iconic figures. In the wake of reconciling Clara Morrison's decades of conflict and affection, her story continues to resonate across modern international conversations about celebrity bereavement, parental influence, and the resilience of creative legacies. Artists and their families navigate the complex interplay of devotion and discipline in view, often with poignant and conflicted outcomes. Clara's insistence on preserving her son's dignity, born from trauma and tempered by late-life acceptance, serves as a touchstone for contemporary discourse. Her journey from revulsion to reluctant reverence underscores the powerful role parents play in shaping shared public memory. Now, let's explore 3 modern icons whose own family dynamics echo Morrison's saga, illuminating how familial bonds can both constrain and amplify artistic brilliance today. Amy Winehouse's meteoric rise and tragic demise unveiled a fraught bond with her father, Mitch Winehouse. As her fame exploded in the mid-2000s, Mitch oscillated between fierce protectiveness and reluctant tolerance of his daughter's self-destructive struggles. In the aftermath of Amy's death in 2011, he assumed the mantle of guardian of her legacy by founding the Amy Winehouse Foundation to combat addiction. His stewardship sparked debates among fans and industry insiders. Did his stewardship honor her raw honesty, or did it sanitize the painful authenticity that defined her art? Mitch's decision to omit certain unreleased demos in favor of more polished tracks reflected a choice similar to Clara's early estate vetoes, prioritizing dignity over sensationalism. Yet by endorsing educational outreach and hosting tribute events featuring candid discussions of addiction, he expanded public understanding of mental health and creative fragility. This dual role of grieving parent and public advocate mirrors Clara's own torn efforts. Both sought to protect reputations while wrestling with feelings of guilt, regret, and love that defied simple narrative framing. Marshall Eminem Mathers' turbulent relationship with his mother, Debbie Mathers Douglas, became a hallmark of his early discography. Hit albums teemed with blistering raps about neglect and bitterness, turning Debbie into both scapegoat and source of artistic motivation. She in turn filed a landmark lawsuit alleging slander and seeking substantial damages, deepening a high-profile rift that fascinated tabloids. Over time, however, their antagonism softened. Marshall's later lyrics pivoted from savage indictment to reluctant empathy, acknowledging his mother's own hardships, poverty, single parenthood, and the struggle to raise an unconventional child. Debbie publicly praised her son's successes, and Eminem reciprocated by inviting her on stage at select performances. Their journey from public feud to fragile reconciliation underscores how creative catharsis can initially amplify familial wounds, only to reveal paths toward healing. Psychologists studying their story note that Eminem's unflinching honesty exposed private pain in a way that ultimately humanized them both and expanded the cultural dialogue around parental influence and artistic truth. Then there's the story of Justin Bieber and his mother, Patty Millett, whose unwavering support provided both foundation and boundary for his unprecedented early stardom. A teenage single mother, Patty raised Justin in a modest home in Stratford, Ontario, nurturing his burgeoning talent while shielding him from predatory influences. As his career skyrocketed, she formally joined his inner circle, negotiating contracts and setting firm privacy boundaries. Reports of Patty confronting paparazzi and enforcing strict curfews offered a rare glimpse of parent-led crisis management in the glare of the global spotlight. Over time, fans came to view her as the stabilizing force behind Bieber's creative evolution, lauding her transparency when she shared candid accounts of his mental health struggles and identity crises in memoirs and documentary cameos. Her early and sustained advocacy contrasts sharply with Clara Morrison's late-life estate interventions, illustrating how proactive parental involvement can both safeguard well-being and enhance the public's understanding of an artist's journey. Across these three modern examples, the echoes of Clara Morrison's story are unmistakable. In each case, a parent confronts the dizzying duality of protecting a child's vulnerable self while honoring the fierce autonomy that fuels true creativity. When Amy Winehouse's father wrestled with the line between tribute and censorship, when Eminem transformed maternal grievances into cathartic anthems, when Patty Millett balanced guardianship and promotion, each scenario demonstrates the transformative power of parental bonds in shaping legacy. Clara's revelations taught us that fear and love often coexist within family relationships, especially under the glare of fame. Her late acknowledgement that her deepest hatred masked a mother's terror of losing her child resonates as a universal theme. The most combustible creative fires often burn brightest within the hearths of our earliest family ties. Today's artists and their parents navigate these challenges in real time. They lean on frameworks born from stories like Clara's, from open dialogues about trauma to formalized plans for creative stewardship. By acknowledging the potential for both conflict and collaboration, modern families continue to refine the delicate balance between safeguarding home and nurturing genius. Clara Morrison's journey remains a guiding beacon, reminding us that understanding the past is essential to embracing the future of artistic expression. Now that we've examined Clara Morrison's fraught relationship with her son and traced its modern echoes in the stories of Amy Winehouse, Eminem, and Justin Bieber, it becomes clear that parental bonds and creative genius are inseparable threads in any artist's tapestry. In each case, a parent's hopes and fears collide with a child's hunger for self-expression, generating both the spark of inspiration and the ember of tension. Clara's evolution, from a mother who feared her son's Dionysian excess to the woman who ultimately embraced his genius, teaches us that creative legacies are not born in isolation but forged in the crucible of family dynamics. As we reflect on these intertwined narratives, we must acknowledge that the most enduring portraits of innovation are those that capture the full spectrum of human emotion: pride, panic, prejudice, and, ultimately, profound love in the realm of archival stewardship and heritage preservation. Clara's late-stage reversal underscores the imperative of truthful documentation. Caretakers of an artist's estate often face the temptation to present a neatly packaged legacy, excising uncomfortable truths in favor of palatable myth. But as Clara learned by granting scholars access to letters and rare recordings, raw authenticity, warts and all, imbues history with gravitas. When she allowed biographers to publish her confessional letters alongside Jim's performances, she enriched the cultural record and deepened public empathy. Today, archivists, historians, and estate managers must strike a balance, honoring personal privacy while resisting the urge to sanitize. Clara's journey demonstrates that transparency about pain and contradiction not only preserves the integrity of artistic achievement, but also fosters a more nuanced, empathetic understanding of the human condition. At the heart of this transformation lies the redemptive power of confession and reconciliation. Clara's decision to reveal the childhood trauma behind her antipathy, her brother's tragic house fire, shifted the narrative from one of maternal contempt to one of protective love. That public admission reframed Jim Morrison's story as a shared family saga rather than a mere rock legend. Modern artists and their families can draw critical lessons from this arc. Acknowledging personal grief and admitting mistakes can become a bridge between private suffering and public celebration. Whether recorded in memoirs, unveiled in documentary features, or spoken aloud at tribute events, honest dialogue about familial wounds invites collective healing and ensures that artistic legacies remain vibrant and true. Furthermore, Clara's late-life collaboration with surviving Doors members reveals the value of inclusive curation. By inviting Ray Manzarek and Robbie Krieger to co-produce the Fire and Grace box set, she wove together multiple perspectives, her own, the band's, and Jim's archived voice, to create a multidimensional portrait. Today, estates and production teams can emulate this model by involving bandmates, close friends, and scholarly experts in curatorial decisions. When competing memories and emotional stakes converge, they generate a richer narrative tapestry that resonates more deeply with fans and historians alike. This approach not only honors the complexity of creative partnerships, but also fosters trust with audiences, who recognize and appreciate the integrity of a tribute built on collaboration rather than censorship. That on a broader cultural level, Clara Morrison's story illuminates how generational trauma and parental influence ripple across time. Her fear of flames, from the literal fire that engulfed her brother to the figurative blaze of Jim's career, became a leitmotif that shaped public memory of the Doors' music. Similarly, the unresolved tensions in family stories like those of Winehouse, Mathers, and Bieber continue to inform our understanding of artistic vulnerability and resilience. For educators, psychologists, and cultural curators, these intertwined narratives offer fertile ground for exploring how early life experiences shape creative expression. Clara's arc reminds us that behind every iconic riff or poignant lyric lies a constellation of private dramas that give art its emotional charge, and that acknowledging those dramas enhances, rather than diminishes, the power of performance. As we conclude this section, consider how Clara's journey from censor to custodian can inform your own approach to preserving legacies. Whether you are a family member, biographer, archivist, or fan, embrace the full complexity of human stories by documenting triumphs and traumas alike. Seek out collaboration across personal and professional spheres to capture multiple viewpoints. Encourage open, compassionate dialogue that transforms conflict into clarity. By doing so, you can honor creativity in all its messy, magnificent glory and ensure that the stories we tell about our heroes reflect the depth and breadth of their humanity. In every chapter of Clara Morrison's journey and the modern parallels we've explored, one truth stands out above all. Legacy is not a static monument, but a living, breathing tapestry woven from triumphs, traumas, and the tender tensions that shape our humanity. When Clara locked away her son's wild genius, she believed she protected his memory. When she opened those letters and invited collective witness to her fears, she enriched his mythos. Similarly, the families of Winehouse, Mathers, Bieber, and many others demonstrate that the interplay of devotion and discipline yields narratives far richer than any sanitized headline. As you reflect on these intertwined sagas, remember that authentic legacy demands both reverence and honesty. Preserving memory means safeguarding not only the shining moments, but also the shadows that gave them depth, color, and context. As custodians of stories, whether as family stewards, biographers, or fans, you hold a profound responsibility. The temptation to favor comfort over complexity can be strong. It's easier to tell tales of unblemished triumph than to navigate the messy undercurrents of human emotion. Yet those undercurrents are the lifeblood of meaningful narratives. When Clara chose to share her letters, She laid bare matrimonial conflict, childhood sorrow, and unspoken regrets that transcended time. By embracing that raw authenticity, she honored not only her own experience, but also the full measure of her son's artistry. It is through that act of courage that we learn the power of vulnerability. The recognition that every heroic legacy is only as resonant as the honesty that underpins it. Apply these lessons in your own projects. Begin by crafting frameworks that celebrate multifaceted truth. If you oversee an archive or curate a retrospective, resist the urge to redact passages that complicate your hero's image. Instead, contextualize them. Provide footnotes that explain why certain choices were made, how family dynamics intersected with creative decisions, and what broader cultural forces were at play. Encourage contributors to share private recollections alongside public artifacts. By weaving disparate threads, letters, recordings, interviews, into a cohesive narrative, you create a tapestry that honors both glory and vulnerability. This approach not only engages audiences on a deeper level, but also invites empathy, allowing others to perceive brilliance and frailty as two sides of the same coin. Collaboration remains pivotal. Look beyond singular narratives by bringing together diverse perspectives, family members, scholars, collaborators, and even critics. When Carla Wong's remarkable restoration of vintage film used interviews from opposing viewpoints, the result was a rich dialogue that transcended nostalgia. Similarly, when curating exhibits on musical legends, incorporate testimonials from roadies, sound engineers, and longtime fans. Include contrasting anecdotes, moments of exuberant creativity alongside instances of tension or missteps, then guide audiences through the complex emotional terrain. This democratized approach acknowledges that no singular voice can capture the full essence of an artist's journey. By staging these dialogues, you transform retrospective storytelling from monologue into symphony, inviting listeners to participate in the unfolding narrative. Embrace the friction. When audiences glimpse only the polished highlights, they miss the sparks that fueled innovation. Encourage safe spaces where raw recollections can surface without fear of censorship or shame. Whether it's a moderated panel at a museum or a digital archive with user-submitted memories, design environments that validate emotional complexity. Offer guided discussion prompts, such as describe a moment when your perception of this artist shifted, or share a challenging memory that deepened your connection. These invitations not only enrich collective memory, but also cultivate a sense of shared ownership over cultural heritage. By valuing friction as much as celebration, you foster an inclusive archive where all emotional shades, from radiance to melancholy, coexist in dynamic harmony. As we stand at the crossroads of history and imagination, let Clara Morrison's story guide our hands and hearts. Remember that family legacies are written not only by the creators, but also by those who love them, critique them, and ultimately reconcile their own histories with the lives they celebrate. Whether you are preserving sound recordings, curating visual arts, or sharing oral histories, commit to representing the whole story. The genius you honor was born of delight and despair in equal measure, and every artifact you steward becomes a vessel for the collective memory you choose to shape. Carry forward the lesson that fear, love, regret, and redemption can coexist, and that embracing the fullness of legacy unlocks perspectives that outlast any single lifetime. May your stewardship of stories guided by compassion, courage, forging connections across generations. As you honor the vibrant legacies you encounter, remember that every artifact, note, or letter holds the potential to teach, to heal, and to light new creative fires. Carry these principles forward, that memory shines with full authenticity.